Hey folks, Matt Sharp here with another Pacific Angler video. But it's not just another Pacific Angler video today. You've probably seen our other videos with fishing with rod, and these videos are more how-to based. Don't worry, we plan to continue bringing as many of those to you as we can, but like I said, today we're going to do something different. You've probably also seen our Friday fishing report on our blog. We've been doing it since 2007, every single Friday, and there's something like 650 articles dedicated to it now. We thought that video content would be a great way to bring you guys that information. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes between our guides, between our clients, between our staff, and we're putting that report together, that some of it gets missed when we go to print. So, if this is something that would interest you, please hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get into the fishing report. Well, here we are. It is August 23rd, plus or minus. I might be doing this a few days early, but it is one of the last big weekends in the summer, and it's a pretty darn good weekend to get out fishing. When we roll over to the weather, because that's where we always want to start, we're seeing a warming trend. We're going to see things get pretty darn hot come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And now we were lucky, we're showing some rain as we speak right now, sort of middle of the week, and that should keep things damp, keep waters cool. That's a good thing, but obviously this heat wave might have some adverse effects on pink spawning habitat. Water hot is not good for spawning fish. And then also some concerns on the sockeye front on the Fraser, because water temperature is really critical for them. But overall, this report, at least this forecast, looks like pretty darn good weather to go fishing in. So we're excited for that this weekend. Now, the other big news this last week was the Vancouver Chinook Classic. This is an event that we've hosted for the last sort of 6 years now, I believe. And it's the biggest catch and release derby in Vancouver. There's $15,000 on the line. And 50 boats max buy-in, and something that is a really cool event. If you weren't in it and you went think about it, come talk to us. We'll make sure you're signed up for next year. But it came off without a hitch. We were worried Mother Nature might change stuff. We've been having such good Chinook fishing out in the Vancouver waters, and she didn't change. It continued. The fishing was phenomenal. The poor wayboat drivers had a workout. There were a ton of fish weighed in. We had the science team, out. They were doing a bunch of genetic work, taking samples from the fish that were being released. We're really excited to see the data that comes out of that. And I guess the big news, who won? What was the biggest fish? Well, it was actually all the big fish came in on Saturday, which was interesting. And right here, the big winner, there's the big prize, and there they are. Colton Snyder, Rodfather. I love that name. That's like a great name for a boat. Won the $15,000. It was like a 25 and change fish. And then an honorable mention, our very own Jordan here was out on one of our guide boats chasing tails, and they managed to pull off third. So big congratulations to all the competitors, all those that placed, and big thanks to everyone involved. We had a ton of wayboat captains volunteering their time. Pacific Gateway Hotel, awesome venue. If you haven't gone out there for a beer on their patio, it's well worth the trip. And then again, all the organizers. So awesome job, and thanks to everybody. So that was the derby. Going into Chinook fishing this weekend is probably more your guys' focus. If you're getting out or can get out, do it. The Chinook fishing has been debatably some of the best this generation has seen. I'm hearing old timers push it back 40 years before they can remember Chinook fishing like this in the Vancouver waters. So if you get an excuse, you got away, find a boat, get out there, enjoy what Mother Nature's throwing at us right now. On the fishing report side of things, we've got some interesting details this week. Jordan's going to do a piece on how to dye bait. Now, funnily enough, you probably don't need to dye your bait right now. The fishing's so good. But Mother Nature can throw curveballs at you, and it's something we've done in previous years where we dye our bait to match the watercolor. Super useful thing when you are working hard for fish. Now, like I said, we're not working hard for fish right now. Go out there, have fun, use methods that you might be able to catch and release a little more effectively with. But if things get more challenging, if you're having troubles, dyeing your bait over the next 2 to 3 weeks is something that's kind of fun and can make a difference. So make sure you check that out in the blog. Links will be underneath this video so you can get all the details. There's also actually a video on that unto itself that you can check out over on Fishing with Rod. So the next big news, the next stuff we're talking about in fishing right now is obviously the pink salmon. And the Squamish River in particular is the fishery going hardest right now. And the fishing is really good. There are lots of fish out there. Alex has been out religiously over the last couple days, putting up big number of days. We're starting to see slightly staler fish, so they're not all chrome like they were maybe last week, but there's still a lot around. Now, they have closed this fishery to catch and keep. It is 100% catch and release, and we're speculating that it has to do with water temperatures, meaning that it's really tough for spawning fish when water temperatures are a little high, and then also the fact that the early component of this fishery, the early pinks coming in, was really poor, and they want to try to spread out that run as much as possible. And obviously those early pinks are there now, and so less pressure, less catch and keep, probably a good thing for them. I'm not going to get into the politics or the biology behind it. I'll look into that a little bit later on when we've got all the numbers in. But the long story short is it's a great fishery. Get out there, whether you got a fly rod, a spinning rod, or a float rod. There's lots of opportunity on the Squamish right now. Now, one of the things with the pink fishery that everyone's been talking about is that the beach fishing hasn't been all that great this year. It's been a little bit slow. It's been a little bit spotty. Now, we did hear some solid reports off the Howe Sound beaches and shore access points in the last sort of 10 days. So if you do want to catch and keep a fish, you can keep them in the salt water right now. Or if you just want to get out and enjoy it, it's definitely worth looking at. For the guys out in the boats, the guys who are going to the usual secret spots, and we won't label them all, but they haven't been doing well. Where they have found fish is literally in open water or up against rock faces, and they're drifting looking for jumping pinks. Usually you want to go early in the morning. Usually you want to look at a day that's calm enough so you can see those jumping pinks from a long way away, and then wind drift. Note that if you see 3 or 4 fish jump, there's probably a few hundred, if not more, underneath those jumping fish. And you're going to be casting fly lines with, we recommend an intermediate or even a heavy sinking line. Or you're going to be throwing buzz bombs, jigs, that sort of stuff into where you feel that the schools are. And it can be super fun, super productive fishing. Now, on the other pink fisheries, the Fraser, we've heard reports that there are fish now in the rivers. We're hearing reports of a few pinks showing up in the Vedder. But those fisheries tend to be more later focused, something we'll talk about maybe in the next week or 2 weeks. The other fishery, though, we look for pinks is up the Indian Arm. And we got reports last week of the first pinks really showing up at the Capmouth. Now, these fish aren't going to the Capilano, they're just coming through, but pinks tend to nose into any freshwater source. And it's a really good indicator when guys on the beach fishing for coho start hooking pinks at the mouth of the Capilano that it's time to start looking up Indian Arm. And that's areas like Kate's Park and then boat fishing all the way up. Note there are a bunch of fish enclosed areas up there for rockfish conservation, so sit down with your rigs, make sure you're familiar if you're going to get out with a boat or you're going to go all the way up and actually fish the Indian. But there are fish there now and it's worth looking at. So, what else we got on the board? We got Skagit. That one's cool. Obviously, that one's really close to my heart. It's one of my favorite fisheries. A lot of the trout bums out there who love fly fishing for trout have been out in force over the last month and been having pretty darn good fishing. But it's come with some caveats. I talked to a couple of my friends who are old timers, and they were sort of asking me, like, are you having really good fishing? And I was, yeah, we're having great fishing. We're catching a lot of fish. And they said, well, we're not. And I said, well, what kind of numbers are you putting up? And they're like, well, we're not getting the 20, 30, 40 fish days that we're used to. And those guys are pros. And so they're looking for the big hatch and the big payday, where I feel that a lot of the intermediate anglers that are pretty darn happy with 3, 4, 5 fish on a day are doing really well, meaning the fish are healthy and they are maybe not as educated because they had a break last season. But we haven't seen those really big hatches, or at least I haven't heard from my friends that are out a lot, and my experience hasn't shown me any of those really hot fishing moments. Historically, those big hatches do happen now, back end of August into September. So with any luck, we'll start seeing those. And it's very likely, none of this I'm saying is scientific, that these were just the days that we happened to be out. Overall, the fishing's been excellent. We've been all putting up really good number of days, but we haven't seen any of those phenomenal, crazy hatches where the water's boiling with bugs and fish. So if you get any of those reports, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Right now, it looks like the smaller mayflies in gray have been doing the best. We're hoping for those big gray, or like green drakes, gray drakes, whatever you want to call them, those big mayflies that come off when the fish go really crazy. And we haven't heard any caddis hatches yet, but those could be happening now. Definitely go out there with some caddis in your box, some large gray mayfly style patterns, some smaller ones for pickier fish, and then your standard stonefly stuff. If you want to read more, Sean's got some details in the Skagit report below. So the Vedder. Vedder's an interesting one. It's one that is probably one of the most popular fisheries that we all fish, and it's pretty well enhanced. And I was curious about it this last week. I called up a buddy of mine. This is a friend I go to high school with. He's awesome. He's a hardcore angler. He's gone to the dark side. He now works for DFO, and I couldn't be happier to have a guy like him in that organization. He's smart, he understands fishermen, but he also understands the science. Now, I called him, and he was actually up on the slide throwing fish over the barrier in buckets on helicopters, working 24/7. And I circled up with him when he was back at the office. It's pretty funny. I think he'd actually prefer to be out there busting his butt, helping the fish out. But he was in the office, and we had a chance to really talk about some of the things going on in the Vedder right now, and it's interesting. One thing we spoke of was some studies that are coming down that are in the works right now, looking at what orcas out in the Sound are actually feeding on, and where they're trying to find out what Chinook those orcas are eating. Now, they can tell from scat, orca shit, what kind of fish it is. So they can tell the difference between koa, they can tell the difference between Chinook, but they can't tell where those fish are coming from because the genetics get so broken down when they go through the digestive tract. So what they're doing is they're actually going out, observing orcas hunting, and then picking up the scraps literally after they've made a kill. Now, this sounds sort of far-fetched or really hard to do, but when you think about it, it's very common that the orcas will pass their food around amongst the pod, meaning a mother to an infant, or even one whale to another, depending on the dominant structure in the pod. And that provides a lot of stuff, a lot of pieces of Chinook floating to the surface. And after it's all over, the observers go in and try to collect as much of that material. From that, they can get genetics that'll tell them what rivers these Chinook are coming from. The study's not science yet, meaning it hasn't gone through peer review. It's in the works right now, and I don't have details on it. But from the initial findings, they've found Chinook that were from the Vedder Chilliwack area that were being fed on by orcas. And so the government mandated the Chilliwack hatchery to increase Chinook production by 100%. Now, this went into effect last year, and they tried to ramp up, and they put in a bunch of infrastructure and started switching stuff around. So this last May, they managed to increase by 25%. So they put 250,000 more smolts into the system this last May, I believe. And then this May, so where they're getting brood stock now, they're going to try to increase that to 2 million. I'm not going to get into the science behind that or the politics behind that, but the bottom line is that could be a pretty cool thing for anglers in 3, 4, and maybe even 5 years from now. The bell curve on Chinook age on the Chilliwack is between 3 and 4 years, with some being 5, and then my buddy's never seen a 6-year-old fish, but they do exist. Usually those fish are taken by nets or sports fishermen or commercial fishermen, but they do exist. So the 3 to 4 year fish are what we're probably going to see the most of back in the river, and it could be something interesting in a few years. So we also had a chance to talk about a bunch of other stuff. We talked about the slide. I'm not going to touch on that today. I'm going to let the politicians duke that one out for now. At the end of it all, when there is real science, when the scientists can look at what's been done, I'll circle back with my buddy and we'll get some more intel for you guys. But as it stands now, just a big thanks and best of luck to those folks busting their butts to get those fish over the barrier, and we hope that it's going to be a positive thing for the fishery in general. We did, however, talk more in detail about some timing stuff, and that's where you guys can tune in. I know I've been rambling here for a bit, but timing on coho, timing on stuff coming down the pipes. They've already seen some pinks in the Vedder. They caught them last week, I believe. They expect that to ramp up with peak or higher peak migration, sort of September 10th range. They've already seen pinks actually hit the slide, which was interesting. They think they're going to hit their boat now, about 8 days when I talked to them, which was about 4 or 5 days ago. And then coho, they're looking at peak migration in October, but it's something we can start looking at early September. And definitely the Chinook, the later component of Chinook coming in that time frame as well. So if you want to get out on the Vedder, it's definitely worth looking at right now. The early Chinook are slowing down, but there's a good number of them out there. And the secondary Chinook, the ones coming now, we should see pretty quick. We will bring you more info on the Vedder. I really like talking about the science behind it. And I hope if you guys like anything that we've done in the report today, you'll smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week in another report.